Good evening, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to dev.talk. I'm Mark Oliver, your host and organizer for tonight. Tonight we're doing the one where we don't break the platform or believe the hype. Can you tell OpenAI wrote that? I can't. So let me introduce the speakers. Oh, I've got proper bios this time. So I'd like to introduce Herve Tribouilly, who is a solution architect. He brings 2 decades of hands-on experience building and evolving complex platforms with a strong focus on e-commerce, React-based front ends, and decoupling legacy systems. And he focuses on system clarity, performance, and long-term maintainability, not just code delivery. And today he'll be taking us through why websites become hard to change and how to stop it. So let's welcome him.
So good evening, everybody. Let's start this talk. So why websites become hard to change and how to stop it is what I'm going to talk about. I am going to include a topic that consists. I'm going to introduce some methods that help teams to change their system, but more importantly, avoid to make these changes becoming a risk when they get delivered on live. And during this talk, I will explore this 4th subtopic down, what isolation of potential feature in this system, how this isolation can affect the delivery for them, how protecting the core of our future can enable this system to become upgradable again, reducing the change scope of my feature so that team gain velocity in their work, and leveraging ownership without adding process is something we will get to understand what it means in the next slides. So who am I? I am a hands-on web engineer with 2 decades of experience in e-commerce. And in the last 8 years, I've worked on decoupling solution and headless system. And that has led me to understand and help this fragile system that has become mature but fragile. And today it's something I'm going to try to describe how we can regain control of this system. So, but before we start, I'm going to make a bit of a story. I am a chess player. I belong to the Pool Chess Club. And I'm going to make a comparison between when we play chess and what we do with our web systems. So here in front of me, I have 3 games. The first game is the start of my game, where there is no pawn moved yet, and my players are quite comfortable, relaxed, and really very much the next move is going to be without any risk, visible risk just yet. Instead, the second board is going to involve a very much more complex situation where every piece is potentially threatening the other. And at that point, my players both are much more stressed. Each move is taking much longer. And potentially, unfortunately, the next move might sort of make me lose the game. And then the third board is a game where there is barely any pieces left into the game. And at that time, what I'm having is a situation where both players are much more relaxed, even though one of the 2 is going to be losing. Basically, I am finding myself with, ultimately, there is only a couple of moves yet to do to be either losing or winning. And this is something I will take with me to help each other to understand how this compared to how our system evolved and what we can do to make them better. So let's start with a web project that starts on day 1. And we have installed our system, and it's quite easy. It gets installed nowadays. We can install our framework in days. And once they're installed, they get shipped with modules. And these modules get installed and set up within days too. So in a nutshell, after a week, we already have a system that is fully working, can almost sell, assuming we have payment accepted, payment configuration set up, and then really very much after a month only, not only our website works, but it's sort of customized in a way that is almost close enough to be production ready. And then we sort of, at that time, we are in a situation where we've got everything ready, and we feel that everything has been so cheap that we are sort of almost there. And this is after 6 months when my team has been able to customize my whole site. After the install of all these modules, we are ready to go live. And this is just something that pretty much most teams that build a website nowadays can deliver. And then what's happening is over time, once the website is live, I have to face not only the complexity of my modules that have been installed, but more importantly, I have to deal with real customers. These real customers have live issues where they are not able to log in for different reasons, and where some other time they can do their purchase, but they also have not been emailed, for instance, their email confirmation. And all this sort of support creates frictions between the marketing teams that all they want is performance, sell more, and the dev team, which is trying to support this system, but unfortunately they can only do so much at a given time. So to resolve this problem, what's happening is into a real world, we swap the module 1 that we had installed 6 months ago for module B, and we expect that module B is going to perform better. But while this swapping happens, micro changes happen, and we lose track of where we were at a given time. Or differently, we sort of create shortcuts because of one constraint or another, and we end up with a situation where the time has gone, my system has increased, the code base has increased slowly but surely, and I find myself with a system that slowly becomes old. And it's old not because days have gone only, but what we realize is this system has been built as a single machine, with every single feature welded onto the same engine. So we are at day 800, and my system still works. It's not a dinosaur yet, but just about. Unfortunately, nobody understands it at this point, because the team that have built this system initially, they are not necessarily there anymore. My features still exist, and they are still mostly written like they were in the first day, but unfortunately I have not the doc that explains how they are supposed to work. As a result, my tests are manual because I can't expect the system to have automated tests. I don't even know what they are doing in the first place. Because my tests are slow and expensive, I am not really very much in a situation where I can rely on them, and as a result, I have bugs on my system that makes me losing money. My brand is not as trusted as it should. My marketing people are shouting. So at this point, I am in a situation where my system is old, and I can keep it, of course, but it means that I am facing often with this sort of feedback where the business decider who are creating, enabling the budget into this company are going to say, do not touch something that works. And instead we find ourselves with systems that stagnate, like this old castle. Or there is this sort of businesses that are risk takers and are going to say, no, we are going to challenge ourselves to go to the next generation of technology, and we are going to rebuild, or we are going to migrate to a system. In which case we find ourselves with this fancy new technology. But the reality is neither of these two solutions is something that's going to create real benefit. Instead, the solution that I'm going to explore tonight with you is to let the teams that we have with us to work with smaller components. And I'm going to also recommend to simplify the core that we have aggregated all everything around it, so that we regain visibility on this system that was powerful one day. So at that time, when we do know that we don't want to rebuild, but ultimately we have to look at what comes next after this old system, the first situation we might be in this decade is to explore whether using headless solution is a possibility. So headless are very powerful. They create fast user experience, and they are also enabling the back-end experience and the front-end experience to be separated, providing more flexible sort of ability to maintain two different roadmaps and yet enhancing my system better. And the second contender to create a better system than I have in the first time is called microservices. Microservices are excellent. They are enabling my system to scale, to have thousands of users at a given time. They are also excellent for creating independent roadmap and being able to be deployed small component by small component independently. For these two reasons, both of these systems are excellent, but unfortunately, microservices come at a high cost. The infrastructure to maintain a microservices architecture is very high. And although the headless has a lot of potential, it's ultimately moving the goalpost into a bit of a place that is not necessarily as well as I'm going to show you next. And therefore, I am going to introduce a different model, different to microservices and different to headless, and that consists in isolating some of the features of my system. By doing that, I'm not going to aim for speed or scale like either microservices or the second one, headless, do, but I'm going instead to focus on getting back to a place where it's safe to develop and when we can understand what we are doing and we can build incrementally things that are getting us to the right place. And at that point, I would like to introduce this system, this diagram that tells us what we've been doing when we have implemented successfully this removing our system from the core. So let's imagine that these four features were modules because they have been added like this to my system initially. If I remove these four modules from my core by just disabling, neutralizing the code base, and instead creating components that are outside of it, then I enable myself to come back to a trimmed version of my core and subsequently easier to understand, easier to document, and more healthy because the upgrade path is back to as it was normally. Conversely, these components are mountable into my core and behave as if they were part of the web page as normal. This is now on top of that, around, I have made sure that each of my components are much smaller than how the code surface of each of these components is very small, or at least it's smaller than it would have been if it was part of the whole system for coupling reasons. Being smaller implies that the testability of each of these components is easier to produce and easier to maintain. And the same goes with the documentation. Each of these small components is something we can document easily, and subsequently, we don't have anymore the worry to lose awareness of or knowledge of your system because we have certainly the opportunity to create these components with what they should have in the first place, testability and documentation and ability to maintain them easily. So this is what I've come to recently. I have built a mini framework, I suppose we can call it, And each of these features that I've chosen, Store Finder, Banner, Booking, and Minicart are 4 of these mini features I have isolated outside of my core. I have ensured that each of them were having a structure that was similar, in the intention that when I'm debugging or maintaining one of the components, I can be sure that the second component is going to have the same structure. And then if I debug one or the second one or third one, I debug the same process. So essentially, I have gone through some sort of common concern that all of us in the IT world we would have: security, data, debugging. And all these components comes with a contract. This contract is built by the core itself. And once the contract is filled with this data, this component can be fed in runtime mode so that it runs according to what the contract is dictating the component to be. So this is a real example. In front of us, we have a store finder. I have built this store finder into, this is a Luma theme. It's a default theme that comes with this framework that I have used. And essentially, all it is this interface shows a interface that is linked to Google Maps with stores that are linked to the merchant that would own this website. And this is a feature that is very common to find on websites. And in fact, commonly, we would build it inside the PHP or the framework that we would have. For myself, it's Magento. Building it inside implies that the data of the store finder gets aggregated to the system. And it also implies that the dependency, which are Google Map, JavaScript libraries, are suddenly becoming a dependency of my core. And finally, the business logic, the logic that lives inside the store finder, finds itself being part of my core, adding complexity, coupling to my system. So instead, what I've created is a very small application that owns everything, the library dependencies, the data, and the logic are both contained in this small application, and therefore the core doesn't have to deal with any of this. As a consequence, if my Google Map JavaScript version changes, my core doesn't have to change it anymore. I've done the same for banners, and banners was a very different system. Why I chose this first is because banners are very common in all websites, e-shop anyway. However, they are also creating very bad performance. So I was thinking to extract this logic from this application and put it instead into this mini application. And by doing that, I've enabled not only to have better performance than when it was in the core, thanks to the fact that this mini application can be mounted on my web page after the first paint, we call this, has been happening. Now, when I am mounting this application after the first paint, we get better score than if we were to build that application as it comes when it's done by default. So now, and the third example is a booking system. So this booking system was much more of a challenge than the other two previous features. However, it was the opportunity to see two things, which were this: it's possible to remove complexity from something that would have been in the core, and instead having it isolated somewhere else, so that we don't create friction more than we have onto this core. Essentially, this removing the booking system from the core has enabled me to get this complexity out of the system, And here I'm making this analogy to the chessboard that has enabled me to remove pieces from the board. I think it keeps, yeah. So at this stage, you have understood that creating this component out of my system was benefit for me to have a simpler core and yet all these components outside more maintainable. And now I am at a place where we know that technically we can build this component. What we don't know is how they perform, whether they gain, whether they are going to help my merchant to perform better on Google SEO performance. So what I have done is I have taken a web shop and I have identified all these blocks as being a potential feature that would benefit from my re-architecture. And initially, I have sort of scanned the website with a normal web crawler. And what I have found is that web crawler into common website these days give some results that are not necessarily excellent. A score of 40 is a score that can be clearly improved. And yet, if you go to very popular sites, very performance sites today, you would find that this score is quite common. So the problem is having too much happening into one system. Although the system does a lot and this performance, ultimately we cannot compete with something that would be much lighter by design. So instead, I have included one of my widgets onto the same site, but only changing one block, not changing the whole things, not rewriting the whole system. And I found myself with the same crawling experience, giving different results. My web crawling was quite interesting. When it found my widget, unfortunately, it was quite disappointed. And the reason is because these widgets get mounted onto the web page and they are not searchable. That was coming as a bit of a surprise to me. And it's something that I have accepted. Fortunately, my web crawling experience was continuing. And what it did turn to be, it's very good news. The score was absolutely amazing. I came to a performance of 100. And I realized that having less pieces into my board was giving me better result as a result. So this is coming to an end. I would like to thank my daughter Emily because she has helped me to make this presentation, and Matthew Ozier, who is a friend of mine and has helped me with rehearsing this presentation. And this is what this presentation has led us to understand. Thanks to this method of working, we can aim at getting faster changes, safer updates, predictable costs, and enable my business to stay with a system that is calmer because of less stress eventually. I hope it has made sense. Thank you for listening.